The sound the door made was barely a click, but it was enough. Her voice dropped to a whisper, then a laugh, then silence. I was only supposed to be gone 40 seconds, walk in, grab ice, walk back out. The cooler by the grill was empty and her dad wanted to chill the good beer. I didn't even finish my burger. I set the plate on the arm of the lawn chair, wiped my hands on my shorts, and jogged barefoot into the house like a man on a mission. But that door, that tiny click, that was the start of it all. The hallway was cooler than outside, but not enough to explain the way my skin prickled. The bag of ice was where it always was, inside the freezer drawer beneath the fridge. I bent down, grabbed it by the corner, and straightened up just in time to see the flicker of movement at the end of the hall. The guest room. Door mostly shut. Sliver of light. Two voices. Her voice. And someone else's. I didn't move for a few seconds. Just stood there, clutching the ice like a man who forgot why he walked into a room. And then I took a step. Then another. The closer I got, the slower they came. Not because I was sneaking, but because I already knew. You can feel a betrayal like a scent in the air. You don't need evidence. Your body knows before your brain catches up. I got to the door just as a hand pulled it closed the rest of the way. I didn't knock. I didn't kick it open. I just leaned in and listened. And what I heard will never leave my skull. Not now, she said, breathless. He's just getting ice. A pause. The kind of silence filled with body heat. Then, we've got time. The sound that came out of me wasn't a gasp. It wasn't a sob. It was nothing. Just empty. I backed away, walked back down the hall like I was sleepwalking. The bag of ice was dripping. I hadn't even noticed. My shirt clung to my back. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. The sun was still out when I returned to the yard. Her dad cracked a joke about the Iceman finally cometh. I didn't laugh. I couldn't even speak. I dropped the bag into the cooler, sat back in my seat, and stared at the drink in my hand like I'd never seen a cup before. I didn't look toward the house when the door opened 5 minutes later. I didn't turn when she sat beside me, kissed my neck, and said, "Everything okay, babe?" Everything was not okay. And what happened next made it worse. Much worse. She had changed shirts. That was the first thing I noticed. The red tank top she'd been wearing earlier, the one with the tiny strawberry print she only wore when she wanted attention, was gone. Now she had on one of my old college tees, oversized and wrinkled. Like she was trying to look casual, comfortable, innocent. She was chewing on a piece of celery, laughing too loud at her sister's story about a broken lawnmower, and pretending nothing happened inside that house. Nothing behind that door. But I couldn't stop seeing it. I couldn't stop hearing her voice saying, "We've got time," like I was just some predictable idiot with a chore and a ticking clock. And in that moment, I realized something I never wanted to believe. This wasn't the first time. She was good at this. Too good. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't heat of the moment lust. It was planned, practiced, polished. I watched her like a stranger. I studied the way she touched my arm when she wanted to pull me into a group conversation, how she leaned on me just enough to look close, but not too much to look suspicious. I saw her eyes flick toward the guest room window once, just a second too long. Not nervous, calculated. And then, when she caught me watching her, she did something that gutted me. She smiled. A soft, sweet smile. The same smile she gave me on our wedding day, only this time it didn't reach her eyes. It was a performance. A script. And I was supposed to clap on cue. I barely moved for the next hour. I didn't eat. Didn't drink. I didn't even notice the heat until her aunt offered me sunscreen, saying I was turning red. I wanted to scream that it wasn't the sun doing it. It was betrayal boiling under my skin. But I nodded, thanked her, and rubbed the lotion on my face like I wasn't melting from the inside out. All I could think about was who it was. I hadn't seen his face, but I knew there was someone in that room. And now, as I scanned the backyard, every cousin, every family friend, every neighbor, it became a silent interrogation. Was it her old high school boyfriend? He was here, helping with the music. Was it one of the neighbor's college-age sons, the one she always called such a sweetheart? Or worse, was it someone married? Someone who looked me in the eye during the prayer before we ate ribs? My stomach turned with each possibility, and that's when she did something that almost broke me. She leaned in close, too close, and whispered, "You're being quiet. Are you okay?" Her tone was gentle, curious, like a nurse asking a dying man how he's feeling. I looked at her, really looked, at her freshly washed hair, the slight smear of mascara beneath one eye, the bite mark on her collarbone she thought she'd hidden, and I wanted to say, "I heard you." I wanted to say, "I saw enough." I wanted to drag her inside, slam the door, and demand names, dates, all of it. But instead, I just said, yeah, just tired. And she kissed my cheek again, just like before, just like nothing had ever happened. But everything had happened. And deep down, I think she knew I knew. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even pretend to. After the last cousin left, after the leftover macaroni was packed and the fairy lights unplugged, I stood in the kitchen with the trash bag half knotted and the hum of the fridge louder than it had ever sounded in my life. Tessa was upstairs, probably brushing her teeth like she hadn't spent part of our barbecue on her back with someone else. I wondered if she could taste guilt in the mint. I hoped so. I finished cleaning in slow motion. Every task was just an excuse to delay going upstairs, to delay lying next to her. I even swept the back porch at midnight, barefoot, in the dark. Because I was scared. Not of a confrontation. No. I was scared of her. What she might say. What I might see in her eyes if I looked long enough. But eventually, even cowards run out of distractions. So I went up. The bedroom light was off, just the soft glow of her phone illuminating her face. She smiled when I walked in, patted the empty side of the bed like it was an invitation to forget. She said, "You don't have to sleep on the couch, babe. Come here." And I almost did. I almost laid down like the obedient man I'd trained myself to be. But then I noticed something odd. Something that didn't belong. A pair of men's sneakers by my side of the bed. Not mine. Not even close to mine. I stared at them for a good 10 seconds before she noticed. Then she said it. The sentence that will replay in my head until I'm old and alone and still trying to understand it all. "Oh, those must be Darren's. He came up to grab something earlier. Must have taken off his shoes." Darren, her cousin's fiancé. He wasn't even supposed to be at the party, said he was on shift at the hospital. But apparently he showed up when no one was looking. Or when I wasn't looking. And somehow his shoes ended up beside my side of the bed. She was watching me now, her eyes squinting in that way she always did when she was lying and trying to gauge how much I already knew. I didn't say a word. I just picked up the shoes, walked out of the room, and set them on the doormat by the front door like they were trash I forgot to take out. Then I slept in the laundry room with the dog. And I didn't cry. Not yet. The next morning, the lies came in layers. She made pancakes. She wore my hoodie. She even brought me coffee in a mug that said, "You're my always." I looked at her, holding that mug, wearing that smile, and I realized she was going to gaslight me into silence, into forgetting, into being a man who ignores his instincts and swallows the truth whole just to keep the peace. But I wasn't hungry. Not for breakfast. Not for apologies. Not anymore. I told her I had errands to run. She said, "Take your time, love." And I did. But I didn't go to the store. I didn't hit the bank. I drove 3 towns over to a strip mall with bad lighting and a cheap banner that said private surveillance and discreet solutions. I walked in, and a woman behind a thick pane of bulletproof glass asked me 2 questions. "Is it your wife? And do you want proof or just confirmation?" I said both. There's a strange silence that comes with sitting in a surveillance office. It's not like waiting at the doctor's or the DMV. It's deeper, like a chapel, only more hollow. No music. No chatter. Just the low hum of old ceiling fans and the buzzing anticipation of betrayal waiting to be confirmed by timestamps and night vision. I sat in that silence for 3 days. I didn't eat much. Didn't sleep. Just answered her texts like a robot. "Yeah, traffic's bad. Just grabbing lunch. Love you too." The woman who handled my case, Rena, was straight to the point. No pity, no soft edges. "We're not here to interpret emotions," she said. "We give you what happened. You decide what it means." And she did. By the end of the 3rd day, she slid a flash drive across the table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I don't even remember driving home. I just remember sitting in the garage, car still running, staring at the door to the kitchen, knowing that on the other side, my wife was probably humming while she made chicken salad. I watched the footage in my car. She'd brought him in through the back gate. It was broad daylight. Family was on the other side of the yard, grilling, drinking, playing lawn games. And there she was, sneaking Darren through the garden like she was giving a private tour. His arm around her waist. Her fingers laced in his. They didn't rush. They sauntered. Confident. Comfortable. Practiced. Like they'd done this a dozen times and probably had. She led him straight into the house while I was outside arguing with her dad about propane. The footage cut to another camera placed inside, motion triggered. It picked them up as they entered the hallway. No hesitation. She grabbed him by the collar and pulled him toward the guest room. I thought watching it would make me hate her. But it didn't. Not yet. It made me grieve. The way she looked at him, that wasn't lust. It was familiarity, warmth, intimacy. That was the part that shattered me. Because I knew that look. She used to give me that look. Back when things were real. Before I became the guy who brought ice and stayed quiet. I sat frozen, heart beating out of rhythm as the door closed behind them. Then nothing. Just a timestamp. 3:47 p.m. The door opened again at 4:16. She came out first. Hair messy. Her hands adjusting her top. Darren followed a minute later, holding his shoes, the same damn ones she tried to explain away. He kissed her neck before he left. A casual kiss. A placeholder. Like they had plans to pick up where they left off. I should have stormed inside right then. Should have dragged her out of the kitchen and thrown the footage onto the dinner table next to her perfect little lemon vinaigrette. But instead, I sat there in the garage, sweating, crying in a way I hadn't cried since my mom's funeral. Quiet, hot tears. The kind you don't want anyone to see because you're not even sure what they're about anymore. I replayed the clip 6 times. Paused it. Zoomed in. Looked for any sign she felt guilt. Regret. But she looked happy. That was the knife in the ribs. Not the kiss. Not the bed. The smile. That effortless smile. Eventually, I walked inside. She was at the counter, slicing strawberries. She looked up and said, "Hey, you're just in time for lunch." Like nothing in her world had shifted. Like I hadn't just watched her cheat on me in 1080p. And I smiled back. Because part of me was too broken to rage, too hollow to accuse. But something had changed. Because now I had the truth. And I wasn't done watching. I spent the next few days becoming a man she wouldn't recognize, not because I changed overnight, but because I stopped being predictable. Tessa was used to me being the one who apologized for interrupting her mid-text, who folded her laundry the wrong way and apologized for that too. She wasn't used to silence. She wasn't built for still water. And the moment I gave her nothing, no suspicion, no reaction, no clues, she started to twitch like a bug on a pin. I didn't sleep in the laundry room again. I returned to our bed like a ghost, sharing space but not warmth. I didn't pull away when she curled up beside me, but I didn't lean in either. I let her talk about what she saw on Pinterest, what her cousin's baby did on Instagram, how the neighbors were considering getting a golden retriever. None of it mattered. It was all filler. White noise. I nodded in the right places and watched her eyes closely, and I realized something strange. The less I gave her, the more she offered. As if silence was a mirror she couldn't bear to look into. The thing about a liar is, they hate a vacuum. They need you to believe something, anything, even if it's just the lie they want to feed you. But if you starve them of reactions, they'll overcompensate. And that's exactly what she did. By Wednesday, she was making dinner from scratch every night. Real meals. Hand-cut vegetables. She lit candles. She wore perfume. She pulled out an old dress I once said I loved, even though I only said it to make her feel better after it didn't fit right. And then, late that night, as we laid in the dark, she reached for my hand and whispered, "Do you ever feel like we've grown apart?" I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask if it was the sweaty one-night stand in the guest room that gave it away, or the stranger's sneakers next to my socks. But I didn't. I squeezed her hand softly, like someone holding onto a branch before a fall. "I've been thinking the same thing," I said. She exhaled, long and slow, and turned her body toward me. "Maybe we should do something together. Go away. Reconnect. Just us. Just us," I repeated. And I meant it, but not the way she thought. The next morning, I called Rena, the surveillance woman, and asked her a question I never thought I'd say out loud. "Can you help me find out how deep this goes?" She didn't hesitate. "Do you want audio or visuals?" I said both. She said, "You'll need to let it happen again." And so I did. That weekend, I told Tessa I was going out of town. Work thing. She didn't ask questions. She offered to help pack my bag. I watched her hands fold my shirts and realized she had no idea I was watching everything. I left the next morning, waved goodbye like a doting fool, then circled back 2 hours later and parked in a fringe driveway a few streets over. The cameras were already rolling. The mics were hidden. I had front row seats to my own life, the version she didn't know I could see. She waited until after dark. "We're something new." Open wine. At 9:47 p.m., the back gate opened. Not Darren this time. Someone else. Someone younger. Someone I didn't recognize. And Tessa, my wife, my forever, kissed him like it wasn't the first time. I sat in my car, in the dark, watching the glow from our living room windows as they undressed each other in the place we built together. I didn't cry this time. I smiled. Because now it was no longer just betrayal. It was evidence. And I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. I didn't go home for 2 days after the second footage came in. I needed space, not from her, but from the version of me that she thought still existed. The fool. The placeholder. The man who thought that loyalty was something you were owed back automatically. That version of me couldn't survive what I'd just seen. The man who watched a stranger walk barefoot through his living room like he belonged there, who watched his wife laugh into another man's mouth, who counted the seconds she kept her wedding ring on. That man had different needs. I stayed in a cheap motel off Highway 7. One of those forgotten roadside places where the carpet smells like rusted air and the vending machine sells toothpaste and instant regret. I didn't sleep much, but I did plan. Every single second of the next week was mapped out in my head, down to the facial expression I'd wear when I said what needed to be said. I knew I couldn't confront her in a scream. That's what she'd expect. That's the role I used to play, the apologizer, the emotional one. No, this needed to feel like a mirror, one she couldn't look away from. Before I left the motel, I made a few stops. I met with a lawyer who didn't blink when I explained what I had. "You've got leverage," she said. "Most men don't even get that far." Then I visited my bank, then my employer, then a locksmith. When I finally returned home, Tessa was in the garden, barefoot, humming as she pruned her stupid roses. She looked up and smiled like nothing had shifted. "You're back early," she chirped. "I was going to surprise you with dinner." I nodded, said I needed a shower. She didn't press. Inside, I moved quietly. Took things that couldn't be noticed, documents, the backup drive, the flash drive with the footage. I loaded them into the lining of an old duffel bag. I checked her phone when she left it in the kitchen to water the herbs. She was texting someone saved under the name L, and there were no words in the messages, only photos. Skin. Angles. Pieces of her I hadn't seen in months. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I left something behind. A single envelope on her pillow. Unsealed. Inside, 2 still images printed from the surveillance footage. One of Darren's sneakers. One of her kissing the new guy at the foot of our couch. No words. No name. Just that. And then I left again. I waited for the explosion. It came in waves. First a missed call. Then 4 texts. "Clark. What is this? Can we talk? Where are you?" I didn't answer. I wanted her to sit in it. To marinate in her silence. The same silence she used to stab me when she smiled through lies. Now she could taste it for herself. But the real moment, the one I had been counting on, came later that night when she called from an unknown number. I answered. She didn't speak right away. Then quietly, "I don't know what you want me to say." That was the thing, though. I didn't want her to say anything. I wanted her to listen. So I did something I'd never done before. I told her the truth, the real truth, without raising my voice, without asking her why, without even demanding an apology. I told her what I saw, what I heard, what I knew. I told her how I watched her make a home feel like a hotel room. I told her about the shoes, the wine, the lies, and the man whose name she hadn't even saved properly in her phone. And then I told her I wasn't leaving out of rage. I was leaving because I didn't recognize her anymore. And maybe I never truly did. There was no shouting. No screaming. Just one last line before I hung up. "You can keep the house, Tessa, but you don't get to keep the story." I thought the worst part was over. I thought watching her in another man's arms would be the lowest point, that the silence, the bitterness, the unraveling would eventually bottom out. But it didn't. It just kept going, deeper and darker, like I'd been standing in the shallow end of something I didn't realize was an ocean. After I left the house for the second time, I stayed with my coworker Miles. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a spare key and a warm beer. I slept on his pull-out couch surrounded by boxes he never unpacked. I didn't tell him much, just that things were bad and that I was getting out. But after 2 nights of lying there staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows on the wall, I knew I wasn't done. Not yet. There was still something pulling at me. A feeling I couldn't name. Like I'd seen the surface of a wound but hadn't gotten to the infection. The cheating, it was real, sure. But something about it felt mechanical. Rehearsed. As if Tessa wasn't just being unfaithful. She was hiding. And I couldn't stop digging. I still had access to her cloud backup. She'd forgotten to revoke the shared folder we created back when we were planning our trip to Oregon. Back when she still held my hand in public and told me I made her feel safe. The folder had grown since then, expanded into dozens of subfolders, most of them labeled things like taxes, invoices, or wedding stuff. I opened the ones that looked mundane. Boring. That's where people hide things. Not in secrets, but in the things they think no one cares to look at. And that's where I found it. Tucked away inside a folder labeled Old Receipts was a password-protected PDF. I'm not proud of how fast I found the password. It was our dog's name and her birth year, predictable. The file opened in 3 seconds. It was a copy of a signed rental agreement for a second property, not under our names, but under hers and someone else's. Not Darren, not L. Someone I'd never heard of. A man named Griffin Wells. The apartment was leased 6 months ago, 2 towns over, fully furnished, rent paid up front for the year. The emergency contact was listed as her. And the part that made my blood turn electric, she'd used my email as the verification point, probably thinking I'd never notice among the junk. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I just sat there in Miles's kitchen, watching the file blink back at me like it was alive. I couldn't tell if this was her second affair or something worse. Something ongoing, structured, sustained, and intimate. This wasn't a fling. This was a life. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So I drove out there. The building was clean, quiet, modern, the kind of place someone starts a new chapter. I stood across the street for 20 minutes before walking in. I told the front desk I was there to pick up something for Mr. Wells, used her last name. They didn't ask questions. They buzzed me in. Apartment 3C. When I reached the door, I didn't knock. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the small gold number on the frame and listened. From inside, I heard music. Jazz. The kind she used to play on Sundays when we were still trying to build something. Then a man's laugh. And then her voice. Soft. Intimate. Familiar. I missed you, she said. I turned around and walked away before I could hear his response. I drove back in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel like I existed. I was just a shadow inside a man, steering a car he no longer fit inside. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a second life. One I was never supposed to find. The morning after I found the apartment, I didn't drive by again. I didn't stalk her socials. I didn't call or text or write a letter she'd pretend not to understand. I sat in Miles's kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, and I realized something I should have seen months ago. Tessa had made her choices, and now it was my turn. I didn't want revenge. That would make her part of my story forever. I didn't want an apology either. Her words couldn't glue back what she'd methodically broken with every smile she wore while lying to my face. What I wanted, more than anything, was freedom. I went home. Not to talk. Not to negotiate. Just to close the door. She was there when I arrived. Sitting at the kitchen table like she was waiting for a storm that might pass if she stayed still long enough. Her eyes were swollen. Her hands trembled when she tried to speak. I made a mistake, she said. I sat across from her, calm, empty in the right places, full in the ones that mattered. No, I said gently. You made a decision. Repeatedly. She tried to explain. She cried. She blamed loneliness, boredom, confusion. She talked about how I drifted, how I seemed distant. And I nodded. Because maybe I had. Maybe I'd been blind. Maybe I'd stopped seeing her clearly when I got too used to loving someone who only offered echoes back. But none of that gave her the right to bury me in silence while building a new life with strangers. She asked if I could ever forgive her. I looked her in the eye. I already did, I said. That was the truth. Not for her, but for me. Forgiveness wasn't about saving her. It was about letting go of the weight that had been pressing down on my chest for far too long. I didn't want to be bitter. I didn't want to carry her mess into the next part of my life. So I set it down, gently. Then I stood. I handed her the divorce papers, already signed. She didn't fight them. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, eyes wet, mouth trembling like she finally understood that the one thing she never expected was happening. I wasn't coming back. 6 months later, I live in a small apartment above a bookstore downtown. It smells like paper and roasted beans and hope. I see Miles once a week. We talk less about what happened and more about what's next. I started writing again. Nothing heavy, just short pieces. Real stuff. Honest stuff. I met someone too. Her name's June. We haven't said forever, and that's okay. We laugh. We talk like we mean it. She knows I'm still healing, and she doesn't try to rush that. She just shows up. And sometimes, showing up is more than enough. As for Tessa, I don't know what she's doing now. And I don't need to. She lost control of the story. And I started writing my own. And for the first time in a long time, I like how it ends.